Leather is available in many different thicknesses. This is also referred to as weights. Depending on what you're trying to make, thickness can be an important factor in choosing a leather and getting a great result in your project. Let's check out the most common leather weights and popular uses for each one. Leather weights. So what we have here is something called a sample ring. And the function of it is to give some insight into what the different leather weights are and giving you an actual look and feel into what each one is. And when we look at leather weights, they're measured in something called ounces. And that's essentially a calculation of how much a square foot of the leather actually weighs in weight. So for example, here we have weights that are going to be ranging from around 2 to 3 ounces. And they're going to go all the way up to around 10 to 11 ounces. And primarily, that's going to reflect in how strong it is, how stiff it is, versus how flexible and maybe a little bit softer it feels. And when we're measuring leather, since the hides are natural and they're not going to be totally consistent along the entire length of a hide, which could be, multiple square feet, the weights are generally given in ranges. So again, as we look here, we see 2 to 3 ounces. That's because across that hide, it's going to average around 2 to 3 ounces in thickness, in weight. And that's going to account for those natural variances in a hide. So you're going to see most leather sold in that range. It's always going to be, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 7 to 8, things like that. So using this sample ring, let's look at some of these thicknesses, and then we'll also look at generally what they are commonly used for. And that way you'll have a feel for if you're looking to choose leather for a project. You have a starting point to know, all right, for a wallet, what's a good thickness to go with? For a bag, what's a good thickness to go with? And that way you'll be starting from a good spot. Certainly, as with any project, preferences and creative factors will weigh in. So you may use something that's a little thicker, you may use something that's a little thinner, but in general, this can be a good place to start. So we're going to start with a 1 to 2 ounce. Now here, our smallest is a 2 to 3 ounce. So it's going to be even thinner than this. So our 1 to 2 ounce are going to be good for thinner wallets, thinner watch bands, for molding, for shoes. It'll be good for thin purses, great for linings, bookmarks, boots, and small pouches. Now we look at our 2 to 3 ounce. And this is going to be great for things such as wallets, thicker watch bands, molding, thin purses, a lot of the similar things. Linings, boots, bookmarks, embossing, good for shoes, small pouches, light upholstery for chairs, couches, and other seating. When we get up to a 3 to 4, this is going to be great for thicker wallets, for embossing. It's going to be good for molding and smaller handbags, purses and boots, shoes, thin notebook covers, pouches, and standard upholstery for chairs, couches, and other seating. Moving up to a 4-5, this is going to be great for things like boots, notebook covers, smaller knife sheaths, shoes and keychains, pouches, wrestling masks, light chaps, smaller handbags and purses, and light aprons. At 5 to 6, now we're getting in more towards, boots and notebook covers. Also, again, smaller knife sheaths, shoes, keychains, thicker pouches, thicker wrestling masks, chaps, smaller handbags, and light aprons. Now as we get into like a 6-7, this is going to be good for heavier boots, larger notebook covers, regular standard knife sheaths, shoes, keychains, thicker pouches, heavier chaps, certainly for handbags and purses, aprons, bags, duffel bags, carrying cases, thinner belts, and then thinner sword and bayonet scabbards, and thin armor. This is going to be starting to get into the more popular kind of universal use thicknesses, is that nice 6 to 7. Now we're into 7-8, and this is going to be good for heavier boots, large notebook covers, knife sheaths, light slings, thicker shoes, keychains, thicker pouches, sword and bayonet scabbards, your typical handbags and purses, light pet collars, thin armor, thick aprons, bags, duffels, carrying cases, belts, and light straps. When we look here at around 8 to 9, we're seeing it get a little thicker, so it's good for heavy notebook covers, knife sheaths, slings, keychains, sword and bayonet scabbards, typical handbags and purses, armor, saddlebags, pet collars, bags and duffels, slings, carrying cases, and belts, straps, and holsters. When we get into 9-10, we see knife sheaths, slings and keychains, more sword and bayonet scabbards, larger handbags and purses. Can be great for saddlebags, pet collars, armor, bags and duffels, different slings and straps, carrying cases, heavier belts, and holsters. 10 to 11, we're getting pretty heavy now. This is going to be the heaviest in our sample set. We're looking at really heavy knife sheaths, slings and keychains, larger handbags and purses, saddlebags, pet collars, thicker bags and duffels, slings, thicker carrying cases, heavier belts, straps, holsters, light saddles, and thicker armor. And so above that, we're going to go over a few categories, and it's going to be even thicker than this sample. So I'm going to leave this here for comparison, but it'll be a little more. So for our next ones, they're going to be thicker than our largest sample here. So what I'm going to do is double it up with the next sizes up to kind of get a feel for what that could be. So now we're looking at around, between kind of 12 to 13. These are going to be really good for, thicker slings and keychains, heavy handbags, purses, like really thick pet collars, heavy slings, cases, really heavy belts, thick straps, typical saddles if you're working with thicker leathers for that, and thicker armor. And then once we get above that, more into the anything, 14, 15 and above, we're really going to be looking at, heavy armor. Now we're getting into light shoe soles, where if you're using a pure leather sole for your shoe, light machine belting, tack, thick belts and straps, leather for saddle working, and any kind of like machine belting or really heavy leather like that. And that's the range of leather thicknesses. If you have any questions, let us know. If you have any tips to share, we'd love to hear them. And there you have it. Until next time.